Hi, I'm Michael Citron with the Parkland Parrot Real Estate Team in Remax Park Creek. Today we're coming to you from another one of our market updates for November 2017 in the city of Parkland and the Coral Springs section of Heron Bay. So what we're going to look at first is the November 2017 sales. So far as of today, there's been 27 total sales recorded in the city of Parkland and the Heron Bay section of Coral Springs, where there were $4 million home sales for the month of November 2017. The median sales price is just about $600,000, and the average days on market is 108. So you see that there were 27 sales, 4 which were $1 million or more in 2017. Median sale price $600,000, and the average days on market 108 days. So it's taking a little longer to sell some houses now. So just a year-over-year average, and I think that gives us the best gauge of what the market is doing and what it might do in the coming months into 2018. Of November of 2016, so year to date, we had 50 total sales, which of those sales, 9 of them were $1 million or more that they sold in price-wise. And the average days on market were 83 days. So if you look at this difference, we have almost double the amount of sales last year. So half the amount of sales this year. We had a median sales price of $650,000 as opposed to now having a median sales price of $600,000, so $50,000 less. And then the average days on market is almost 25%. So it's taking that much longer, 20% or more, to sell a property today, and that's overall in our market. So if we look back to October of last month, and please keep in mind October, we had a lot more sales because a lot of people couldn't close because of the hurricane. So we did see a lot of higher numbers. So 46 total sales, which 4 of the sales were $1 million or more. The median sales price was $630,000, and the average days on market was 78. So we still see the $630,000 price, going down from $30,000 to this month, and average days on market 78. But that could be a little bit different just because of the hurricane, and we didn't have a lot of closings, so that could be affected. But if you look at the year-over-year statistics, we're seeing a change. We're seeing homes taking longer to sell on the market. We see an influx of luxury listings up to over $1 million. I mean, that is going to be a third of the real estate market as we get into 2018. So it's really important to understand, where is our market headed? Well, I see our home market in different price points changing differently. If you live in a house where it's the price points in the 400s to 600s, that's a hot spot. We're seeing a lot of people looking to move and live the Parkland lifestyle, get their kids into the great school system that we live in, and they're looking to get in there. So that price point, they're coming from other areas that they're just paying a little bit more in their mortgage payment, or very similar, just to get into Parkland. So besides that point, when you get in the $700, $800, $900 million plus market, there's a lot of houses to see. There's a lot of inventory. They're staying on the market even longer than the average 108. We're seeing homes in the $1 million range, going through maybe 3 realtors, being on the market 6, 9, 12, 15 plus months on the market. So it's really imperative that you understand that this market is overall from price points in the 300s to the multi-million-dollar market. So, really looking at it, we can almost do a separate video just for the $1 million seller that's thinking about, making a sale and selling their house in Parkland, because those numbers are totally different. So, but it's definitely affecting the overall market. The lower price points are affecting the higher price points, and now the higher price points are driving down the overall market value. So understand that this affects everybody. The luxury market staying on the market, I think there's 30 plus listings right now in Parkland Golf and Country Club. There's a lot of listings in East Parkland and Cypress Head. So there's a lot of inventory that needs to sell, and it's taking longer to sell, as we can just see in the average days on market going up to almost 25%. So if you're thinking about making a move, thinking about what's going on for the new year, really give us a call. Your home, wherever it's located, it's very specific to what's going on in that unique community, as well as that price point. So if you're in the 500s, I sold a couple houses this past week in Parkland Isles. That market's on, really strong in that 500 price point, because there's not a lot of inventory in that range. Maybe there's, half a dozen homes for sale. But when you start ticking into the 7s, 8s, and the $1 million price points, buyers are very critical in that point. They're offering lower, they're getting in at better deals, and just because there's so much inventory to go through. So it's really important as we get into the new year, if you are one of those sellers even in one of these sellers in this, the 5 to 600 price point, if you're looking to cash out and get the best bang and get the most money out of your property, it's important that you list with somebody that really has a pulse on the market. I know this market like the back of my hand. I watch every sale, no matter what price point it is, because it affects your house. I live in Parkland myself, and I keep a look at every Parkland sale, including the Parkland Isle sales, because it affects my bottom line, my value as a homeowner, my investment, my largest financial investment. And we just want to be that go-to agent, that real estate team that helps you with all your real estate needs or any referrals that you might have as we get into the new year. So if you're thinking about selling, please give us a call at 954-609-0591, or we have our website page. It's myparklandhomevalue.com. That's myparklandhomevalue.com. You can see another video where I discuss the prices. You can fill out your information, and we'll give you, a personal evaluation of your house. Get it ready for the new year, because a lot of people now are in that holiday time, and we're enjoying time. I hope everybody has a great holiday, but certainly we should be starting to put that plan of action of discussing the price, the product, the promotion that we implement for each one of our clients. So if you have any information, give us a call. This information is always online, and we'll give the link to our page on our website so you can see the past videos for our market updates, Michael's monthly market updates, and I'd love to earn your business and trust. Thank you so much, and have a great day.